When Bill is in Domino's bedroom, his cell phone rings. He puts his finger to his lips, motioning for her to be quiet, then walks to the side of the room and answers his phone. Cut to Alice sitting alone at the kitchen table in their apartment beside a television. She asks Bill how much longer he will be, and he lies to her, saying he is still at the Nathansons. The movie playing on the television is Blume in Love, 1973, particularly relevant as it is about a divorce lawyer whose wife leaves him after catching him cheating. The film's tagline, "A love story for guys who cheat on their wives," could function as a subtitle for Eyes Wide Shut too. Although Bill does not fully cheat, so his version would more accurately read, "A love story for guys who almost cheat on their wives." Blume in Love is written and directed by Paul Mazursky, an early Kubrick collaborator. Before becoming a writer-director himself, Mazursky appeared as an actor in Stanley Kubrick's first feature film Fear and Desire, 1953, a title that also applies to Bill Harford. An anti-war film, Fear and Desire displays early warning signs of themes that would later become common throughout Kubrick's career. Mazursky plays Sidney, a soldier who kills a local peasant girl while stranded in enemy territory. The movie disappeared after limited distribution because Kubrick was unhappy with it and discouraged its re-release. For decades, Killer's Kiss, 1955, was considered Kubrick's first official feature-length film, until Fear and Desire was finally released on DVD and Blu-ray in 2012. The scene cuts back and forth between Bill at Domino's and Alice at home. Bill stands in Domino's bedroom beside a mirror on the right side of the screen. A fragment of his reflection is visible in the mirror, along with half of a mask that hangs on Domino's opposite wall. Behind him is a window with partially drawn Venetian blinds. A moment earlier, but now out of frame, we saw Domino's television, turned off. We also glimpsed another mirror on Domino's wall, opposite the one Bill is standing beside. Alice sits at the table with the television on the right side of the screen. Behind her are glass cupboard doors, resembling a window. Alice's reflection flickers faintly on the television screen, which itself is reflected in the cupboard window behind her, a reflection of a shadow on a screen. Back to Bill. Directly beneath the mirror is a book entitled Shadows on the Mirror. The television screen and mirror act as windows between the characters' environments, gateways positioned in parallel, each in the same place relative to Bill and Alice in their surroundings. A husband, attempting to cheat on his wife, talks to her on the telephone while standing beside a mirror. The wife, meanwhile, speaks to her husband on the telephone while sitting beside a television that plays a film about a man trying to win back his wife after cheating on her. That film, Blume in Love, was made by Stanley Kubrick collaborator Paul Mazursky and features Shelley Winters, who previously worked with Kubrick on Lolita. Blume in Love even alludes to Lolita, which may partly explain Mazursky's casting of Winters. It is another example of how mediums of communication in Eyes Wide Shut, telephones, notes, television screens, paintings, also function as messages to the audience, present for all to see, even if not immediately noticed. Eyes Wide Shut. Blume in Love contains its own themes of mirroring and duality. Parts of the story are set in Venice, Italy, and others in Venice, California. Eyes Wide Shut also connects to Venice, Italy, a historic merchant hub, through its use of traditional Venetian masks. Thomas Mann's novel Death in Venice, 1912, tells the story of a man in his 50s who travels to Venice and becomes increasingly obsessed with a 14-year-old boy he encounters there. Though written over 40 years earlier, Death in Venice clearly resonates with Lolita. Mann, like his contemporary Arthur Schnitzler, was heavily influenced by Sigmund Freud and his theories on dreams. Freud even regarded Schnitzler as his literary doppelganger. The particular Blume in Love scene shown in Eyes Wide Shut is also significant, as Julie Kearns observes in her shot-by-shot analysis. Open quote, "The camera pans right over a young blonde man who had been eyed earlier by a much older man and had spurned his glance, the scene an obvious reference to Death in Venice, in which a composer goes to Venice and falls in love with a preteen boy. Unlike Lolita, however, nothing happens between the pair in Death in Venice," close quote. In the same way, nothing happens between Bill and any of his sexual prospects. Kubrick provides commentary on Eyes Wide Shut within the film itself by choosing to show this Blume in love scene, in which the characters allude to death in Venice. That, in turn, connects to Lolita and circles back to Kubrick. With its network of intertextual references, Eyes Wide Shut resonates on a metatextual level. Movies within movies, stories within stories. The protagonist of Death in Venice visits a part of the city called the Lido, the same area that hosts the Venice Film Festival, the oldest and one of the most prestigious, alongside Cannes and Berlin, film festivals in the world, where Eyes Wide Shut made its European debut. Paul Mazursky himself appears in Blume in Love as a character named Hellman, recalling the figure of Red Cloak in Eyes Wide Shut. Meanwhile, Alice sits at the kitchen table smoking a cigarette, with a glass of milk and a box of Snackwell's Devil's Food cookie cakes laid out before her. Earlier, Alice and Helena sit in front of the television, watching a cartoon, The Fright Before Christmas, a segment from 1979's Bugs Bunny's Looney Christmas Tales. That cartoon features the Tasmanian devil drinking milk and eating devil's food cake, like Alice, disguised in costume like Bill, amid heavy use of Christmas imagery. One visible book title in Domino's apartment is Introducing Sociology, 1996, a real introductory textbook for university sociology students. Sociology is the study of human behavior and how spheres of activity are influenced by intersecting factors such as economic class stratification, political systems, laws, religion, sexuality, and gender. Film analyst Tim Kreider borrowed the title Introducing Sociology for his essay on Eyes Wide Shut, in which he makes several compelling observations. Another book on Domino's shelf is Shadows on the Mirror, positioned directly below a mirror. Kearns describes it as, open quote, a kind of thriller about a female lawyer whose husband was unfaithful. Then, when widowed, she goes about having brief affairs with men, restoring their confidence. But one vicious misogynist of a client stalks her and keeps her under surveillance as a possible replacement for his missing wife. Close quote. Kearns also notes that Chris Isaak's Baby Did a Bad Thing, a song featured in Eyes Wide Shut, comes from the album Forever Blue, which also contains the track Shadows in a Mirror. The lyrics describe two lovers who have separated, one hoping they will reunite, but the shadows in a mirror reveal that they are wrong and the relationship is truly finished. The shadow motif also connects to Helena through the film adaptation of the Greek myth Helen of Troy, 1956. In the movie, Paris initially mistakes Helen for her beautiful slave, so she pretends to be the slave and speaks of herself as Helen's shadow. The story continues to play with the idea of dual personas for both Paris and Helen. Helen of Troy is portrayed by actress Rossana Podesta, who happens to share a birthday with Nicole Kidman, June 20, 1934 and 1967, respectively. The shadow theme extends further into the book Helena reads at bedtime. Open quote, I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. Close quote. In this context, the excerpt takes on an eerie, vaguely sexual undertone. Alice reads along with Helena, encouraging her, and becomes particularly gleeful when Helena recites the final lines, while Bill looks on silently. The poem might resonate differently if the pronouns were she or her. Here, it plays almost as if Alice is coaching her daughter to embody her own idea of what a woman should be, a counterpart to a man. This recalls another scene where Alice helps Helena with math homework, calculating how much money boys have. The poem My Shadow is by Robert Louis Stevenson, whose most famous work is the Gothic novella Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, another story that delves into duality, the light and dark sides of human nature. In Full Metal Jacket, when a colonel asks Private Joker why he wears a peace sign on his body armor while also having Born to Kill written on his combat helmet, Joker replies, I was trying to suggest something about the duality of man, the Jungian thing. Carl Jung was once a collaborator of Sigmund Freud, a psychoanalyst whose theory of the shadow In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents a person's unknown dark side, embodying everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself. Instinctive, irrational, and prone to projection, the shadow contains unconscious sexual and animalistic impulses that often surface in dreams and visions. Jung explains that when an individual makes an attempt to see his shadow, he becomes aware of, and often ashamed of, those qualities and impulses he denies in himself, such things as egotism, unreal fantasies, schemes and plots, carelessness and cowardice, inordinate love of money and possessions. In relation to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Jung argues that it must be Jekyll, the conscious personality, who integrates the shadow, and not vice versa. Otherwise, the conscious becomes the slave of the autonomous shadow. As this process of integration unfolds, the libido leaves the bright upper world, sinks back into its own depths, below in the shadows of the unconscious. What then emerges is what was hidden under the mask, the shadow. While much discussion of Eyes Wide Shut frames the film as Freudian, Jung's descriptions of the shadow apply just as powerfully. Consider the character Carl, another of Bill's possible shadow projections, perhaps pointing us directly to Carl Jung himself. Coincidentally, Carl Jung and Stanley Kubrick share the same birthday, July 26, 1875 and 1928, respectively.